Sterenberg, Brazilian journalist, and I'm honored and pleased to be here and welcome you all to the One Planet Network Forum 2024. The forum, which is co-hosted by the government of Brazil and the city of Rio de Janeiro, situated within the framework of Brazil's presidency of the G20 process, aims to catalyze ambitious action on sustainable consumption and production to reduce inequalities and achieve just transitions for all. In order to discuss the different aspects of the subject, over 400 people, including ministers of the environment and high-level officials, representing 40 member states, more than 30 businesses, leaders of major groups and experts from diverse fields are gathering this week in Rio. Alongside a program of roundtables, thematic sessions, plenary discussions, and an exhibition space, the One Planet Network Forum 2024 will host dialogues among senior policymakers, global business leaders, and prominent representatives from major organizations. But why are we here? We are here because persistent inequalities and social injustice continue. According to the World Inequality Lab report, the share of the bottom 50 of the world in total wealth terms is 2%. The share of the top 10% is 76%. Thus, stark inequality contributes to patterns of unsustainable consumption and limited access to resources for the poorer groups still lacking access to basic necessities like food, clean water, and healthcare. We're here because unsustainable consumption and production directly contributes to climate change and resource depletion. The continued rise in greenhouse gas emissions is leading to severe climate change impacts, with the IPCC warning that global temperatures are on track to exceed 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels by 2030. And we're here because the world has seen limited progress in circular economy solutions and waste reduction. Despite efforts, global waste generation continues to grow and is on a projected trend to increase by 70% between 2015 and 2060. The shift to patterns of circularity is too slow, with the global economy remaining largely linear and with low rates of material recycling. That's why we're here, because we need to move further and faster. This opening plenary will provide a unique platform for policymakers, business leaders, and representatives from major groups from across the globe to unite with a common purpose and a renewed focus. At the end of these 2 days of the forum, let us have strengthened global partnerships and collaboration on sustainable consumption and production between governments, businesses, and civil society organizations. Promoted and spotlighted innovative solutions, from effective policies to emerging technologies for reducing inequalities and achieving just transitions for all. And finally, come away with a renewed sense of urgency for coordinated and collective action. I would like to warmly welcome our speakers and invite to the lectern on the stage Mr. Ricardo Piquet, Director of the Museu do Amanhã, Museum of Tomorrow, this amazing venue where we have the chance to gather today. Mr. Piquet, please.
Bom dia, todos, a todas. Good morning, everyone. I have some words to say welcome here at the Museum of Tomorrow, but I'd like to say some words in Portuguese. I think everyone has the translator. Bom, primeiramente, dar as boas-vindas, o agradecimento à senhora Elizabeth Marema, diretora executiva da UNEP, Jorge Laguna, seu diretor, de formulação de políticas da ONU, nosso embaixador André Corrêa do Lago, embaixador para todas as causas globais do Brasil. Muito obrigado pelo seu trabalho e dedicação, ministro. Lucas Padilha, nosso prefeito internacional, substituindo aqui o prefeito Eduardo Paes, que está numa jornada próxima aí, e tomara que próspera. Acho que o Marcelo, presidente, não chegou ainda. Nosso amigo e ministro, estava na agenda aqui, ministro-presidente do STJ, Herman Benjamin, está a caminho, é outro parceiro grande aqui do museu. Cumprimentar todo o time aqui do IDG, do Museu da Manhã, aqui dedicados a recebê-los, e dizer que é uma honra recebê-los todos aqui do One Planet Network Forum, essa iniciativa do Programa das Nações Unidas para o Meio Ambiente, o PNUMA, e do governo brasileiro. O Museu da Manhã é um museu de ciências aplicadas, um espaço dedicado à reflexão dos desafios e oportunidades que mudarão nosso futuro. Porém, nosso futuro próximo, como eu mencionava há pouco, o amanhã não é futuro, não é um futuro longínquo, mas é um futuro próximo, e a gente diz que a nossa mensagem filosófica básica aqui no museu, que o amanhã é hoje, e hoje é o momento de atuarmos para construirmos o amanhã que desejamos. Por isso esse museu se chama Museu do Amanhã. Estamos aqui explorando caminhos para futuros desejáveis, com discussões pautadas na sustentabilidade, a nossa relação com a natureza, com o planeta, e na convivência, a nossa relação entre nós mesmos. Na sua essência, o museu é um lugar de inovação, diálogo e ação. Dizemos que é um espaço de diálogo com todos. Nem sempre conseguimos com as extremas, de um lado ou de outro, porque não são propensas ao diálogo. Mas aqui é uma casa do diálogo. Há 9 anos fazemos esse trabalho. Desde a nossa inauguração, temos nos dedicado a construir um ambiente de ciência, tecnologia e cultura que se entrelaçam para inspirar a transformação social que desejamos. Vamos além das exposições que temos aqui. 3, 4, 5 exposições temporárias, além da exposição principal, que convido a todos a poder visitar nesses próximos 2 dias. Buscamos esse diálogo e uma visão de futuro compartilhado, de responsabilidade coletiva e ação em prol de um mundo mais justo, mais inclusivo e mais sustentável. Acreditamos que o caminho para a equidade passa pela economia circular e por modelos de consumo. Como falávamos ainda há pouco com a ex-ministra nossa Isabela aqui, o padrão de consumo é um ponto-chave que esperamos que seja bastante debatido nesses encontros. E tem sido o museu um aliado nessa discussão, promovendo não apenas o debate, mas provocando questionamentos mais de 1 milhão de pessoas que nos visitam anualmente. E dizer o seguinte, que esse museu é um museu popular, onde mais de 50% das pessoas que visitam esses museus não são habituais de museus, mais de 20% declaram que nunca estiveram no museu antes. Então é uma nova audiência, uma oportunidade que este museu consegue abrir para essas pessoas. Nossos programas educativos e exposições se alinham com práticas sustentáveis, envolvendo ativamente jovens, comunidades locais e públicos de todas as idades na busca por soluções. Sabemos que a mudança de mentalidade é crucial para garantir um futuro sustentável e justo, e por isso, empenhados em ser uma plataforma para essa disseminação de boas ideias. A colaboração é outro ponto central da nossa atuação. Para que possamos atingir nossos objetivos, é fundamental que governos, organizações internacionais, setor privado, ONGs, academia e sociedade civil trabalhem juntos. Este fórum exemplifica essa colaboração, reunindo atores diversos para pensar em como podemos, de fato, acelerar a implementação de soluções de consumo e produção sustentáveis que combatam a desigualdade e promovam a transição justa. Eu acrescentaria ainda que ponto de debate muito oportuno são as forças que dialogam nem sempre como deveriam entre democracia e ditaduras, autoridades públicas, às vezes privadas, que contestam o desenho das democracias que convivem hoje. Por fim, quero agradecer ao One Planet Network, ao governo do Brasil, à Prefeitura do Rio de Janeiro e a todos os parceiros que tornaram esse evento possível. O Museu da Manhã está profundamente comprometido com a busca por soluções inovadoras e sustentáveis e juntos poderemos transformar esses amanhãs. Muito obrigado, tenham um excelente dia, contem conosco e visitem o museu. Muito obrigado.
Thank you. Obrigada, Piquet. Now, I'd like to invite, in order to deliver his opening remarks, Mr. Jorge Laguna Celis, head of the One Planet Network of the United Nations Environment Program. Por favor.
Bom dia a todos e a todas. É prazer estar aqui em Rio de Janeiro. Good morning to each and every one of you, our dear partners, our dear friends who have made the effort to travel from far or to travel from close, but you are investing your time to be here with us today. As I was hearing today the director of this wonderful museum explain the ethos, explain the attitude, explain the vision on how this museum, upon which it's built, and its wonderful architecture, I was reflecting, how much that is similar to the way we work. How much that is similar and encourages us in achieving our mission. And let us all remind us what we are here to do today. We are here to do three simple things that I keep on repeating, but I believe they are extremely important. We all have a role to play to change the way we think, to change the way we act, and once we have done that, to inspire others to act accordingly. And that's what's beautiful of the One Planet Network, and that's what's beautiful of this group of people. It is that leadership, it is in each and every one of us. Whether we represent governments, and I want to quote here specifically a number of ministers who have taken important time of their important responsibilities to join us today or will be here in the course of the day. I will just recognize these important ministers, Mr. Adrian Forde from Barbados and traveled from Barbados to come here. We already heard Ambassador Correa do Lago and many other important authorities that will be here representing different levels of government here in Brazil, showing the leadership for transition to sustainable consumption and production patterns. Minister Maisa Eloisa Rojas from Chile, Fernando Lopez, El Salvador, Virato Sanchez, Guinea-Bissau, Letsema Andonsi from Lesotho, Ain Behadun Sahi, who is here with us today from Nepal, the Minister of also Environment and Forestry of Laos, and Abdullah bin Abdulaziz from Qatar. Thank you, ministers, for coming here and showing with your presence the leadership that member states are taking to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. In addition to ministers, I really want to recognize and appreciate the presence today of a number of significant, important, relevant member states who are also taking action in their own way. Argentina, Belgium, China, European Union, Finland, Germany, India, Italy, Jamaica, Mexico, Mozambique, Netherlands, Oman, Philippines, Russian Federation, Saudi Arabia, Sri Lanka, South Africa, Slovakia, Switzerland, Tanzania, Turkey. The list, it's indeed quite long and quite impressive. Leadership does not only retain the primary responsibility of governments, but change cannot happen only with legislations, only with resolutions, only with decisions of governments. Governments depend on institutions and stakeholders that make possible change. And in this regard, I really want to appreciate the time that local authorities have taken to be here with us today. Foundations, NGOs, academia, financial institutions, specifically also the private sector representatives that are here, and the United Nations agencies and families. We, through the United Nations and the One Planet Network service by UNEP, provides that space for these actors to come together. And on behalf of the United Nations entities, particularly, of course, UNEP was represented here by Madam Elizabeth Merema, Deputy Executive Director of United Nations Environment Program. But not only UNEP here, this is not a UNEP forum. This is also a forum of the ILO, of UNICEF, of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment, UN Habitat, UN Tourism, UN Trade and Development, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, the UN Forum on Indigenous Peoples, and the International Resources Panel, just to quote a few. Last but not least, in terms of recognizing who are the stakeholders that are needed to take change, I want to spend a few minutes just speaking about two important stakeholders. First, I will speak about the youth. And we're talking here about one planet that we want to handle with care. We want to handle it with care for the present, but also, most importantly, our responsibility is to handle it for future generations. And if you have a moment today, and all of you that have achieved significant responsibilities in your areas of expertise, please spend some time to engage, discuss, share advice, in particular to our wonderful volunteers that are wearing these beautiful shirts that says One Planet, Handle with Care. They come and they have been an important asset of this forum. They all are students of international relations from the Federative University of Rio de Janeiro, and they want to learn from you, but they also want to challenge you. They also want to ask you questions. And so these are, in a way, our future ambassadors, and we owe a responsibility to them. All together, we comprise this network that's helping advance the sustainable consumption and production agenda, and I repeat, changing the way we think, we act, and inspire. As I conclude and as we look forward to these wonderful days of discussions and dialogue, I believe that we have an opportunity to achieve a number of goals. Of course, it's important that we look back and we celebrate all the milestones that as network we have achieved through our programs, through our impact initiatives, through the individual and organizational members that are part of the One Planet Network, comprising over 4,000 individual organizations and more than 6,000 individual members. Let's also look forward, and as we celebrate action, as we learn, as we share experience, let us challenge ourselves to set direction and raise ambition for the network, for people, and for our planet. Specifically, and this is where we look forward to seeing leadership and the board of the 10YFP that comprises 10 member states, and we will hear about them a bit more in our conversation. We'll remind you, we hope that these 2 days of deliberation conclude with an important call for action that sets direction for the next year of the network and helps us impact important multilateral processes such as the G20, the Summit of the Future, the United Nations Environmental Assembly, and the conferences of the parties of the Climate, Biodiversity, and Pollution Conventions. So let us raise impact on finding solutions for more sustainable tourism practices. Let us work hard in these next 2 days for enabling inclusive solutions that will unlock the barriers to transform our food systems. Let us work for integrating circularity criteria in the public procurement of both food and construction assets. And let us work also towards increasing the use of established guidelines and principles for providing product sustainability information, the consumption information agenda. Let us support and find ways to support countries and industries prioritizing and implementing sustainable and circular economy innovations and solutions into their national determined contributions and the strategies for addressing biodiversity and pollution agendas. Last but not least, let us also prioritize and promote disclosure measures on circular economy approaches, particularly for the private sector, which is eager to lead in the circular economy agenda, but it's also waiting signals from governments. How can we move towards a global circularity protocol for business that helps us measure, account for, and transform our value chains for more circular economy practices? Last but not least, let us all work together in providing greater visibility to those groups that have been left behind in our linear economical transitions, particularly those that are at the bottom of the pyramid and sustain the circular economy agenda. I think of marginalized communities, I think about waste speakers, I think about indigenous peoples that have been left behind. Now they have to be at the center of our deliberations, including with a gender perspective. We call upon you to embed these important social dimensions in the way we think sustainable consumption and production, and we act for circular economy approaches. Only this way will be possible to use the wonderful tools that we have to reduce inequalities, to promote and achieve just transitions for all. So on behalf of the wonderful team that services the One Planet Network and the 10YFP, I want to welcome you, wish you excellent 2 days, and we are at your service to support you in these 2 days of discussions. Thank you very much.
I'm a little shorter. Thank you, Mr. Laguna Celis. Our next speaker will be the Secretary of the Civil House Office of the Mayor of Rio de Janeiro, our international mayor, Mr. Lucas Vosgrau Padilha. Welcome, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for coming to Rio. Dear guests from all over the world, students, authorities, I would like to thank you for coming by congratulating Ambassador Correa do Lago for dealing with the Brazilian leadership on these many issues, bioeconomy, climate change from a diplomatic perspective, reaching important agreements in the past couple of days here in Rio. So thank you so much. Please, let's give him and every diplomat joining the G20 and you a hand for coming to Rio to make change. Mayor Paes is sure that the G20 is all about bringing people together to this very special city. Rio is a city in the global south, representing everything you can find in terms of potential, but also inequality. The many needs of access to natural resources, and at the same time, an industrial powerhouse on energy and many other important areas for Brazil, Latin America, and the world. Rio encompasses all you can find in terms of issues and solutions to thrive on urban SDGs. It is a city that is a stage and wants to be an actor as well. Eco 92, Rio Plus 20, now the G20, and next year BRICS, and the COP30 coming to Brazil. So Rio is eager to have you here to find room, inspiration, ideas, and people to discuss what's important for you that are coming from abroad and for us that are welcoming you to the city. As our former minister and good friend Isabella says, it's time to give Rio back to Brazil and to make Rio the capital of Brazil for some issues, for some days. We can play a role if we are open and if we are wise to have you, our good friends from the UN, our good friends from all over the world, north or south, west or east, finding in us good reasons to visit. We have this beautiful museum and we want to do more, so you can keep coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The third speaker in this panel will be the Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, Ms. Elizabeth Mrema. Ms. Mrema, welcome. I'd like to invite you to the lectern.
Morning. Bon dia to todos. Good morning to you all. My pleasure to be here, and allow me to recognize first all the ministers who have accepted our invitation and agreed to join us here. Distinguished director of this beautiful museum. I hope we'll have an opportunity, as we've invited us, to see what is hidden under this beautiful building. Thank you very much. authorities here in Rio for welcoming us. Many thanks. This city is important when we look at environment. A number of key instruments were born here. They bear this name. So it is an important city for us in the field of environment globally. Thank you very much also for inviting us. And of course, congratulations to the government. Many things are happening this year, next year in this country, holding the presidency of G20, preparing for the climate COP30 next year is not a small achievement. So again, many congratulations to the people in the government of Brazil. Allow me also to recognize, I don't want to say new old friends like Isabella there. So it's good to visit this country because many times we meet outside there and not meeting home. So it's quite a pleasure. But also everybody who has joined us this morning for this meeting. We are discussing here sustainable consumption and production. And many times we look at these three words as if they are for the government to deal with, and not each and every one of us as an individual from our own individual. And my colleague previously has underlined, how do we change our own, myself, yourself, the way you eat, the way you choose your food, the way we choose our clothes, where is it coming from? So actions are with us as individuals, and not that we are waiting for the government, for the private sector to do. They do the big things. But if we are the one to dictate the market, then the market will follow suit. But if the market continues to produce unsustainably and we go and knowingly we buy instead of rejecting them, the market will continue to produce. But if we decide to go sustainably, the market will have to follow suit. So we have a responsibility as individuals to make sure that me and you change our own way of life, our own way of eating personally, and that is what will dictate the market we see. So responsibility is on us as individuals. I underline that, and not government, not private sector, not NGO, not the youth. And in fact, the youth are trying. I think it's us, the older generation, who have to catch up with the young generation, because the change is already happening with the young generation. We, the old one, we are still pulling our legs, but delighted that the youth, who are our children, grandchildren, are forcing us also to think different. And many times also when we're in this public forum, we tend to speak so much at high level, while some of these issues we are dealing with are really at local, individual level. So we also need to look at how we communicate these, what seems to be big things, but actually they are simple because everybody in society needs to be part of that. So I really thank the One Planet Network for bringing us all together. The government of Brazil, the Rio government here in the city of Rio de Janeiro, the G20 president, all for giving us this opportunity to engage and begin rethink, to think differently. And the thinking differently is us, me and you, not government, not the big things out there. So our own individual way, the way we look at extractive processes, the way we consume, the way we dispose what we use, our own waste at home, at that level, is actually, this is what will drive the market for the global economy in the future. That's what will help us to change. And this is where the heart of inequality, unfortunately, and environmental degradation is. Exactly what we do as individuals. So in other words, inequality is not just consequences of a sustainable pattern. Unfortunately, it is also the key driver of this unsustainable consumption and production. Over the past 50 years, we have seen tremendous processes improving the quality of life of many of us across the globe. But this progress, unfortunately, has come with a steep environmental cost. The cost which affects our own lives, affects our own daily life, affects our own health. And you see, again, it's us as individuals, not the government. Of course, it costs the government budget in terms of providing health facilities. But if we are able to reduce that, it means also the government costs for health facilities will also go down. And that will give an opportunity for the government to put that cost, to put that money into other development issues. And these benefits, even where, again, they happen, be it environmental harm or otherwise, that sharing, again, we see a lot of inequality there. And our unsustainable consumption and production, who are the mostly affected ones? The poor, the women, the marginalized groups. And these are the very people who depend on the natural resources for their survival. And unfortunately, they are the first ones who bear the consequences of depletion of these resources. And if I may just give an example, 1/2 of the global land-related biodiversity loss which occurred in Africa and this continent, Latin America, and these regions, yet they generate less than 10% of the global economic value. And you can see this disparity is not just about numbers, it's about the real people and the real lives. Communities are suffering as the result of the decisions which are made and impact far beyond their own countries or far beyond the borders. And this inequality, we can see it is worsening and it's increasing. The richest 10% of the global population literally takes 52% of the global economy, while the poorest half earns only 8.5%, earns just 8.5%. The high-income countries consume 6 times more materials per capita and cause 10 times more climate impacts than the low-income countries. But the impacts are where the low-income countries suffer the most brunt of those impacts. If we look at the data from the International Resource Panel, which helps us to identify some of these problems, and if we look at the 10-year framework program on sustainable consumption and production, which helps us also to translate that data or this data into actionable solutions. So as we work to decouple the well-being and economic growth from resource consumptions, we must actually ensure that our strategies for sustainable consumption and production do promote equality and uphold human rights for all. We must transform the international financial systems to reduce that inequality and explore innovative ways to fund sustainable solutions. Trade agreements need also to drive sustainable resource use. Low and middle income countries must have access to green technologies, bringing that development gap and fostering inclusive growth. We must create opportunities for vulnerable populations to also benefit from the sustainability initiatives. And this includes ensuring fair distribution of resources, investing in human capital, funding social programs, as well as creating jobs. And finally, we must incorporate effective data and mobilizing frameworks that track the resource use and its impact on well-being, while supporting the development of the new global metric that goes beyond GDP and measures human well-being. We can look at ways to shift from the linear business model towards circular economy in many different ways. But just to name few, let's look at how the building and construction happens. Our own mobility, plastics, and negotiations are currently going on, globally, legally binding plastic pollution, including marine, hopefully to be completed before the end of the year. Fingers crossed. Let's look at textiles and fashion. And as I said at the beginning, we look at what we are using. How was it produced? Is it from sustainable cotton or what is this exploitation of labor of the young children? Choice is ours. Let's look at the food we eat. 30% of the food produced globally does not reach our homes. And all of us, probably I can say all, not majority, when we go to the supermarkets, we will look at the glossy tomato, gloss apples, all those with good shapes, same size. So imagine how much of that is destroyed because, again, our choices are we want glittery, smooth, clean. Any shape which is deformed, we don't want to take. It is destroyed. And that is 30% of the food. And yet, we have millions of people in many societies starving because they've no food. And then on the other hand, we are throwing and wasting. That's the choice for the future, for the museum of tomorrow, where we are. Let's rethink. And therefore, we are really looking at reforms in some of these sectors, which will cover literally 60% of the planet's carbon footprint and over 80% of its nature footprint. Again, the choice is with us. And by taking these few steps, we can ensure sustainable growth that is inclusive, it is just, and it is beneficial to all of us. And the One Planet Forum this year is one of that unique space, giving us to be able to be convening here, to collaborate, listen to each other, and advance the shift to patterns for sustainable consumption and production. We should not waste any time. As I say, the choice is with us, not the government, not the NGO. And let's use these 2 days to really move from ambition, action, and fulfill that Sustainable Development Goal 12, which is specifically sustainable consumption and production. We must step up our efforts, sustainable consumption and production, and this forum will help us create that coherence across the many global, regional, national, and local initiatives, and bring together the various stakeholders, the various players. They help strengthen this global movement of action and reduce overlaps, promote synergy, and ensure that we take those sustainable choices. So the forum, looking forward to help us to contribute through this One Planet network, the new strategy and direction as we move forward 2025-2026, showing the way forward for cooperation and multilateralism. I'm grateful once again to Brazil. It shows that example in leadership, sustainable consumption and production, and that's why they've agreed to have us here. And here we have over 40 member states represented, including the private sector, international actors, but key is us individuals present here who will make that change moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mrema, for your very powerful words. Before I go ahead, I'd like to stress Mr. Piquet's invitation. All of you are welcome at exhibitions in the museum. You just have to present your ID. And so join the museum because it's very beautiful, very special. Now, last but not least, I have the honor to invite Ambassador André Aranha Corrêa do Lago, Secretary for Climate, Energy and Environment of the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Relations. Please, Ambassador, opening remarks.
Thank you, Leila. So it's a great, great pleasure to be here with all of you. And I first welcome again the ministers that came for this event and all those that traveled to Rio to come here, and congratulate all the youth that I see here around us. And also, I want to thank Ricardo Piquet for this wonderful venue. And one of the most wonderful things when we come to this museum is that you always see it very full and full of children. So this is a huge success, apart from being spectacular and contributing so much to Rio de Janeiro. I would like to salute Jorge, who very kindly worked so close to us on that subject. And obviously, Elizabeth, who just made a wonderful statement. I can't agree more with you that I think that the individual are the ones that are going to change everything. I want to salute Isabella Teixeira, our former Minister of Environment, who is the co-chair of the International Resource Panel, and also Marilyn, who is the head of the International Resource Panels. I would like to say very few words because we have, I think, heard already many inspiring ideas, but we are very happy that this is a week in which Rio is hosting many events related to this agenda. And as most of you know, this agenda is very much linked to Rio, as was said before, specifically to Rio plus 20, when I had the pleasure to working so closely to Isabella. I think that Rio is the capital of sustainability in Brazil, and the mayor's office is doing an amazing job also in that sense. I would like also to remind that the One Planet Network is what keeps alive the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns, and how this subject is absolutely key and has to come back, because we cannot look at this agenda as something negative, but as something that teaches us how to be happier and at the same time handle with care the only planet we have. I would like to say just a little word that we sometimes, the younger people or the general public, think that things don't advance as quickly as they should. But I believe that this kind of effort, like this one today, and we're going to have for 2 days, and others, like we just had the G20 on bioeconomy, they look like small steps, but they achieve enormously. And I would like to remind all that when Rio 92, the Earth Summit, finished, most people thought, well, it didn't have so many results. And when we look today, how it really changed the world, how we looked at biodiversity, how we look at climate, the Agenda 21, how we looked at sustainable development. The world needs these meetings. The world needs you all thinking about the solutions that will make this world better. So thank you so much for UNEP, because it's keeping this agenda alive in so many ways, and it is a great pleasure to have you all here in Rio with us. Thank you very much.
Now I'm really shorter. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Muito obrigada. Now we're going to have the panel discussion. The participants will be Mr. Jorge Laguna Celis, whom I invite once again to the stage, one of our chairs. Thank you. Ms. Annika Lindblom, head of the 10 YFP board and director of international and EU affairs of Finland's Ministry of the Environment. Please, Ms. Lindblom. Ms. Isabella Teixeira, co-chair of the International Resource Panel. And to moderate the debate, Ms. Merlin Van Voor, head of the International Resources Panel of the United Nations Environment Programme. Welcome, Ms. Van Voor. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And while we just wait for people to settle down and to welcome some of our guests who've just arrived, welcome. Very quickly, what we thought we should do in this session is, I think, to hold people accountable. It's been a long time since the World Sustainable Summit in Johannesburg. I think that was 2002. We've come a long way since the 10Y FP, which was approved by the UN General Assembly. We've also come a very long way since the Rio process. And so what I thought my job should be, which is to make people a little bit uncomfortable, which is to ask the tough questions. Why is it that this agenda, which is about sustainability when it comes to consumption, and that's us, we consume. We have cell phones, we know where the lithium comes from, we know what it takes. We also know the production side. We understand the science, we understand all of what that means, and we know that. And so the chapeau for this particular discussion, before I hold my colleagues accountable, is with Jorge, and I'm the head of the UN's International Resource Panel. And we had an idea that it was important to focus the discussion on the issue of inequality, equity, and the just transition. I don't need to explain to you in the audience why we thought those three things matter so much right now. Inequality, equity, and the just transition. Because people, we think, have agency, and we assume they have agency. And like my executive director, Elizabeth Marema, just said, it is up to us. But at the same time, it's also up to us to make sure that people who do not necessarily have the voice or the power to influence what happens on the production side, to make that more tenable. And so very quickly, I'm going to turn to Jorge, and I'm going to break a little bit with the script, which means I'm going to say, just quickly remind the audience, and then we'll go to our colleagues, of why at this particular moment here in Rio, and as the ambassador who has just left said that he thinks Rio is the capital of sustainability. And Rio is also the host of the G20. And Rio is also one of the founding parents of the BRICS Plus. So why should this audience and people who are wanting to make change, why should they take us seriously? Why does the paper that we did with you matter?
Very briefly, because without science, without science-based targets, without the information of what direction we are taking, we're just guesstimating. And so what is absolutely critical, it is to base our targets, to base our partnerships, and to base our actions on a baseline that is informed by science, for sure. Back to you.
Thank you, Jorge. And I think to make it more practical, and this is where I'm going to come to our colleague, Annika. And Annika is the head of the 10YFB board. Annika is also the director of Finland's international and EU affairs. But I think more importantly, Annika, from what I know, you demonstrate a sincere understanding of what it means to take a message from the community and take that to the level of national politics, but also the level of geopolitics. So my question to you is, based on your experience in Finland and maybe your experience with your colleagues in other parts of the world, how is that working?
It's going to work. Oh, yes. So pleased to be here in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. I was here 12 years ago when we actually adopted the 10-year framework of programs, and it is exciting to see how it has evolved since then and how the network has expanded. So great to be here. And Finland has been very active since the very beginning in advancing the strategic approach of the 10YFP, but also coordinating the very concrete work under the 10YFP, especially on sustainable buildings and construction. And for us, I think it's very important that while we are active in the international arena on SCP, we have to show leadership also in our national measures and national policies. And that's the only way to be, credible. But in Finland, our approach enhancing SCP and circular economy is very multifaceted. So we don't have only one way to do it. So we have various strategies, roadmaps, experiments, legislation that supports circular economy. But one element that combines everything is that we have been developing these policies in close cooperation with stakeholders. So with ministries, with businesses, with research institutes, but also with municipalities and local actors. So it's about whole of society, as you said. Jorge said earlier today that we have to think, act, and inspire. And I would add that we also need to change the way we plan and design our policies, our cities, our infrastructure, as well as our daily lives. And I would like to emphasize it's not only about what, but it is only about how to do it. And our first national roadmap for circular economy was adopted in 2016. And what was important at that time was that it was actually initiated by the Finnish Innovation Fund, which is non-governmental. And so there was a huge hype around circularity and circular economy, and it was not bound only by the then existing government policies. So it was like a societal movement in Finland. But Finland and the government at that time wanted to sort of, on the basis of the roadmap, to start to process developing a strategy on circular economy with targets and policy tools to promote circularity. And the common thread in this process was collaboration and cooperation. The chair of this process came from the financial world. It was the CEO of the biggest bank in Finland. So we had citizens panel consisted of 50 people who volunteered to participate in the discussion, so they could provide the voices of the ordinary citizens to the process. And we also consulted scientific panels. We have panels on climate, on nature, and on sustainable development who gave their views. And the end result was, I think, quite historical, that we set concrete targets to curb the overconsumption of natural resources, and as well as to become carbon neutral by 2035. And then as a civil servant point of view, it's great to see now that also the current government is taking over these targets and continuing this policy. And I think one of the lessons learned definitely is that we need to work long-term, beyond government terms, otherwise we won't success. And my last point here is that we need a mix of measures in implementing the SEP and circular economy policies. We have we are developing green deals with business actors, like a voluntary measures where they take ownership on their own measures. But at the same time, the government is starting to design a circular economy law, which will be then hopefully adopted in 2 years' time. And that will replace our current waste law and will focus more on the whole life cycle of materials. So we need legislation, we need voluntary measures, we need ownership from different partners, and we will need to work together.
Thank you very much, Annika. And it's clear that it resonates a lot with the audience, and it builds on what Jorge started by saying, which is you have to start not only with a vision or ambition, but you do need to get down to the concrete reality. And what you've just described, what's happening in Finland, is the practical steps. Legislation, inclusivity, bringing on board other stakeholders. You mentioned the societal movement that is also an important part of making sure that, as I say when I started, the sustainable consumption and production agenda, we're trying to make sure that it includes equity issues, addresses inequality issues, and then also takes us to where it's more inclusive, which brings me to a question for Isabella, and many of you know her as the former Environment Minister for Brazil, but I know her as my colleague and friend, and she's the chair of the International Resources Panel, and she's been helping us to look at this issue of consumption and production through the lens of inequality and equity and justice transition. So Isabella, as our friends and colleagues meet today and tomorrow, What do you want to tell them?
Hello, good morning. Drink a good caipirinha, low carbon caipirinha. It's good, no? This is about the future. And about consumption. It's okay. It's about consumption also, production and consumption. But of course, this is a carioca joke. I think so. And welcome to Brazil, Marilyn. Welcome to Rio, and Elizabeth, my dear friend. I'm so happy that I can meet you here. Okay, and also Piquet, thank you for hosting us, for embracing us more than hosting us. This is a spectacular museum. I'm so proud to be here, and also what it means for our city and for our country. I'd like to, first of all, of course, Jorge and Anika, I'm very honored to share these floors with you. But I'd like to mention 2 or 3 things to understand the process when you go to discuss sustainable consumption and production and how you should consider the future. I remember that I was, as a minister in Brazil, Brazil proposed really an ambitious plan to manage sustainable consumption and production, and also I know that we draft the first purpose of sustainable development, SHP, as a sustainable development goal. The countries didn't want this. Okay, and I remember that as high-level panel member with the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, we worked hard together with Germany to propose this. So it's around less than 15 years ago. If you go into the diplomatic world, if you enter, everyone saw what it means. But at the time, everyone liked to discuss equity, inequality, and just transition or just fair development. So this is the first momentum. This is very interesting to observe. After this, we came together with science, and it's very important. It's the momentum that we have international resource panel, okay? And how science is so important, not only to share data and information, but to play as a political player. Why? Because we need to improve the decisions and to understand better the diversity of the situations around the world and how we'll come to discuss not only environment, but nature. And this is the second point. We are not discussing anymore biodiversity alone. We are discussing nature, and nature means biodiversity plus natural resource. Okay, and also I'd like to be ambitious or disruptive plus technological development, because probably we're not able to manage nature in the future if you don't have innovation and technological development as a partner. And we need to understand this because the world changed. And as you mentioned, this is nature. Okay, this is not something that we feel dependent on, but this is nature. And trying to figure out which countries in the world have critical minerals to produce this means how we're looking for to address fair transition or to address better inequalities. It's not only social inequalities, but environmental inequalities. And this is why the importance of the debate about footprint, nature footprint, carbon footprint, consumption footprint, means today that we need to come into individuals, but also to go into, for example, international trade. And we go into supply chains, and to try to understand the new momentum of commodities, of global commodities around the world. So it's an individual choice, but also a collective one to understand when I buy something, what I'm buying. And this is very interesting how we come internationally in diplomacy, and I will share 3 words: reduction, efficiency, and sufficiency. And how the diplomats today, or diplomacy is coming to say, I agree, or I don't agree, or I disagree, if you prefer. And how do you like to block things? And this is the real world also, it's not only the individual worlds. So my point here is that we, as individuals, in these cities in the next 2 days, you have opportunity, really important opportunity, to understand the momentum that we are discussing SCP. We are not more discussing the past. We need to understand, we need to face the future. And to face the future, you know that you don't have enough resource, natural resource, to manage the ambition of development in the next years. Okay, you move from 30 billions of tons, 7 billion tons of extraction in natural resource from 70s to 106 billion tons. This is the scientific data. And we are raising this by 60% and then until 2060. This is completely unsustainable. But this is also part of the new geopolitical game. So the problem that we need to face is not only the individuals, and I understand, for me it's a priority, but we need to understand that we're getting older, consider the agenda. So we have another adults into the room. And this means that we must discuss environment concerns, also climate concerns, or nature concerns, consider two things. The new dimensions of the global is not only more global dimension, it's a global and planetary dimension. It's new. When into the global perspectives, and you go into geopolitical game, the states, okay, they manage the agenda, and you know if you have sufficient way to do this or not. But when you go to the planetary dimension and you come with the societies, what we are learning that this global arrangement, the state member arrangements, the multilateral system as it was framed in the past, this is not able to give the answers that we need to move faster as we need to move faster. And this is why today you have this wicked situation going into polycrisis, as UNEP named it recently in a fantastic report, and saying that we need to understand how to connect the dots. And to connect the dots means not only globally, but individually. And this is my second point. We need to understand how the new generations, because they are there, they will assume the responsibility to pay for changes. And this means how we'll come, for example, beyond, we need to go beyond greenwashing. It's not greenwashing. Greenwashing is part of the past. But greenwashing to play based on green action. And this means that we need to understand costs. This is my last point. When you go into global supply chains, and you have, for example, green protectionism for the international trade, what some people don't understand is that we need to move from cost to price. And we need to pay for this. Let's discuss how to pay for this. To understand the costs and the price of sustainable consumption and production in the world. If not, for me, it's fake green. Okay? It's a waste of time. And for me, it's my responsibility as an individually to discuss this, to change, and to pay for this. Because this means that the new world, how the global planetary dimension, this costs money. This costs natural resources. This costs our commitment and our responsibility to change. If not, I'm sorry, we will fail again. It's true, but I do believe that we can do better than we're doing today. But don't forget, drink low-carbon caipirinha in Brazil and make the difference. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Isabella. And I like your takeaway points, which is green, which is about the green wishing, which is a way to think more positively about our future. I like how you say there's individual choice, but there's also collective choice. Coming to the science, and this is not just because I'm from the International Resources Panel, but if you do have time to look at the report in some detail, we try to come up with a measure of inequality and equity, where we talk about consumption footprint. So what's my footprint as Merlin, who currently lives in Europe, and what is somebody else's footprint in Dakar? And how do you measure my footprint with that person's footprint? I'm putting it in simple terms, but we've really tried to do that, and we've also tried to do the same on the production side so that we can help the legislation which you were talking about, which I'm sure you had to provide evidence for why you make legal choices for how to guide citizens. So I know, Jorge, we're out of time. Last words that you want to give to people before we let them go off to their sessions.
My two messages are quite simple. The first one, it is, let's use these 2 days to base our discussions on science. And I invite you to take a look at the paper that we are going to be posting today, 10 science-based recommendations for reducing inequalities and promoting just transitions. Has been a very important collaboration with the International Resources Panel. Once we have that baseline, that what does it mean, what type of actions we need to take. So let's use these 2 days to connect the science with the actions. Those are my 2 cents.
Great. And thank you, everybody, for indulging us and for allowing us to go a little bit over time. We will probably see you in the corridors during the next 48 hours. And like Isabella says, enjoy the caparina, you say? Low carbon. And apparently there's an event this evening. But I look forward with Annika and others to see you in the corridors, and thanks to our host, and the ambassador has just left, and thanks to our deputy executive Elizabeth Marema for being with us here today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Marlene.